Well, it says 4:59, but it's like in some seconds, so I'm going to call the meeting to order so we can get things started. Would you all please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And could we please have a roll call?
Smith,
Here.
Larson,
Here.
McGee,
Present.
Pelosi,
Here.
Newton Azor,
Present virtually.
Summers,
Here.
Thompson,
Here.
Rollins,
Here.
Cisneros,
Here.
Bach, McLeod,
Present online.
Samuels, and Johnson.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. And so, shall we continue on with the budget meeting?
Yes, let me just get the screen here shared.
Do we have to do a public hearing?
Do we have to announce a public hearing and all that?
I think it's already open, correct?
Yeah, it should still be open.
Okay.
Yes, okay, thank you. Get the parliamentarian in here.
Okay. Before I jump into the last part of the presentation, which is going to be the next steps, I did want to do just a brief recap because I'm sure all of you remember every detail from our 3-hour conversation last week. But just a reminder, so last week we did talk through the majority of the city's budget recommendations. So this included going through some of the changes that occurred with this 2025-2027 recommended budget in terms of process, so moving from that very reactive process to a more balanced conversation of revenues and expenditures, how you can link that budget with your strategic plan in order to move goals forward, and ultimately how we can begin to set up the community and the city really to start to bring down that growth in expenditures while balancing that revenue conversation, which is a very new conversation for this group. We also talked about some different ways to be transparent. You'll hear a little bit more about that tonight. And then we moved into some of the goals behind the actual budget process this year. So working through some of the key challenges that are facing the city right now. So things from an economic standpoint, you heard about what will essentially be 25.1% inflation by the end of this biennium that we're discussing tonight. You also heard about some of the political challenges that are coming down from both the state and the federal level, as well as a more local challenge here at the City of Albany, which is that impending group of retirements that we're going to see over the next biennium. So those 53 retirements that we're thinking about. You also heard a lot about turnover, burnout, and the impacts those are having on the bottom line. You'll remember as we talked about public safety, we did talk about positions there, both in the police department and then also a later discussion around fire overtime that we will be having as we try to bring down overtime costs for the city. And then you also got to hear about a number of reorganizations and recommendations for various departments that are aimed at, again, bringing down either that expenditure line long-term, so bringing down that cost to our residents, or addressing the revenue piece. We talked about things like the Civic 501c3, which is a major project we'd like to tackle. You heard about things like community development fees that we would like to tackle in this biennium. And then you also got to hear about some exciting projects moving forward from your strategic plan as it currently stands. This includes the recommendation to provide funding for that Citizen Civic Academy. And then we did end on a fun conversation around both our Parks Department and the investments that need to be made there, as well as a discussion around the library and how we understand our needs as our library grows and make strategic investments in that program. We ended the night with a revenues discussion around city services fee as one of really the only tools that the state of Oregon really leaves cities to address funding gaps. You heard a couple of options there. The first option, which was a continue, keep on, keeping on, was at a $13 a month plus an index to inflation. What that essentially meant was that you were staying with the same level of resourcing, but that means backing out all of those recommendations, all of those projects to address those revenue and expenditure lines. And really, it ultimately means a decline in service because, as you heard from Peter very early in the night, that $9 that we have had since 2021 simply does not go as far. It has eroded to about $6.70 in its equivalency today. The second option that you heard, the recommended option from staff, is the $14.77 option with an index to inflation. So that supports all of those recommended items that you heard about, gives us the ability to do those major projects to move those lines. And then you did hear about a third option that we entered last minute based on the conversation the prior week at council from the library board, and that is that recommendation of adding an additional nickel if you want to cover that potential funding gap in the library. So with that, unless there are any major questions you want to stop me for, I can move into the next steps portion of the evening. Okay. So talking about next steps, before I go, go ahead.
Yeah, check with the folks online. Anybody online?
Anybody online have anything, any questions, any comments?
Not at
Hearing
this time.
none?
Nothing from me, thank you.
Okay.
So I accidentally gave a little bit of a preview there, but one of the things that I want to talk about first in the next steps is I've talked a lot about transparency and engagement. And I think it's very important especially when we're talking about revenue changes, additions to the budget recommendations, that we do a good job of making sure we communicate those back out to residents and help them understand how their dollars are being used, what they're going to, and really what is the true cost of programming. So we've been working for several months with our communications and engagement team on what I think is a very exciting campaign that we want to roll out this year around the budget process. And just real quickly, does anybody want to take a guess at what the most popular post on our social media was this year outside of AI Cat joining the police department? So funny enough, the most engaged in a positive way post that went out on our social media this year was actually a post that started with, "Look at the city wasting your taxpayer dollars." And this was in regards to the hanging pots that are downtown, which everyone loves. It actually got a ton of shares, a lot of great engagement, a lot of people who normally don't engage with our post coming back in, learning something, recognizing, sharing their joy for what we do in our downtown and their investment. So as we were coming into this budget process, we really talked a lot about how do you start to address misinformation in the budget. And as we really went towards it, we suddenly realized we had an opportunity here. And that is, let's redirect that negative sentiment, that don't trust government, and let's reappropriate it for our own purposes as we work through the budget, the budget this year. And so hashtag City Budget Unmasked was born from our communications and engagement team. So essentially, this is a broad campaign that we're going to be launching this year to enhance transparency and engagement around the city budget. So as you can see there, we are reappropriating a lot of those common phrases that get a lot of traction, unfortunately, on social media in a very negative light. And we are going to use that for our own purposes to start using the algorithm to spread information for us that we can help control. We are also going to use this at events. You heard during the city manager's portion that the communications and engagement team would be getting out at more city events. So one of the items that they want to do during the summer months while they're out at some of the various concerts and various events is actually putting together an activity where people can try to guess what the cost is associated with the particular event that they are at. And then at the end, they can unmask the event and see the true cost that goes in behind personnel, materials, all of those other pieces. At the same time, you will see that rolling out on our social media as well. And as you can tell, they've already had a lot of fun with going down this route. Some other things that we're going to be doing this year to enhance transparency. You have heard already about the digital budget book that was in your email. We are going through a transition right now to a digital budget book format, which will be ADA compliant. So that will allow some of our residents who have not been able to access the budget to have more of an interaction with that. It will also allow us to better tell stories, connect narratives, and make those connections with the strategic plan. And then we will also be releasing things like a budget video this year, really trying to hit people from different directions in terms of information and engagement. And then we will also be rolling out quarterly financial reports. So we talked about earlier in the year that we would be rolling out in this next biennium strategic plan updates on the quarter. So those will be combined presentations between the finance department and the city manager's office to help you understand what is happening both with the budget side of things and moving programs and projects forward in relation to that strategic plan. So getting back to that connection on strategic budgeting. Moving forward, as you can see here, we've got this laid out on, we're calling it our conspiracy board right here, but you can see May, June, this is the staff finalizing the budget based on the feedback from tonight. Then moving to that June 11th date, that is when council and the ARA board will adopt their budget. So when we conclude the city portion tonight, we'll get into that ARA portion, we'll go through that. And then you can see there in October, we talked about those quarterly reports. We have that first one penciled in for that October timeframe. Moving into November, that is when you will begin to see that strategic planning kickoff. So last week we talked about community surveys, those engagement pieces that start to happen to set up council for their spring conversation. Those will kick off in November, all leading up to that March-April strategic plan update, really trying to make sure that you have a good pulse on the community. And then as you can see, in June of 2026, I talked a lot about supplemental budgets, helping us to be nimble and adaptive. So we are currently penciling in a supplemental budget after that strategic plan update, recognizing that there's likely going to be changes in priorities, changes in where the council wants to see resourcing go, and we want to be prepared for that. Just also looking forward, we are going to continue to look at the budget with a lens of continuous improvement and really the organization as a whole. You've already seen a number of major steps that we've made just in the budget recommendation presented to you over the last 2 nights. But we're going to continue to develop on that and try to hone that in and continue to improve. The strategic plan link into this year was really retrofitted in. The strategic plan, when it was adopted 4 years ago, was not approached with a strategic budgeting lens. So we really had to work hard to retrofit that. This time around, we can do good education for the council, good conversation, and provide you guys the information you need to be able to make a concerted decision moving forward in terms of the strategic plan. And then we are going to also work on things like resiliency. So we did talk about some of the object code consolidations that happened this year. And part of that is to help us be able to report better on our financials, model better on our financials. This is also going to allow us to have conversations around how we diversify our revenue sources and how do we make our revenue sources more sustainable and where are areas that we can address to get the most bang for our buck in terms of that expenditure line. And then finally, we're going to look at further process improvements and automation. So where can we adapt policy in order to make things more efficient and move things forward? You heard a lot about the large number of retirements that are coming over the next 2 years, particularly in that first year. One of the items that we're currently exploring with the HR director and myself is, can we take a similar approach to FTEs as we do on, say, our procurement and contracts, where some of that authority for reorganization, as long as it doesn't go outside of the budget, could be done at an administrative level rather than having to come to council. That's something that delays us by like 45 days when we have to put those into packet. So those are some of the things that we're thinking about and we'll continue to think about and have discussions on over the next couple of months. And with that, we were so close to the end last week. Recommended action for tonight. We are recommending approval to move forward the 25-27 recommended budget so that it is prepared for council to adopt on that June 11th date. And with that, I think right before I turn it over for questions, I just want to offer out a huge thank you to everyone that is here tonight, and especially a bunch of our staff back here in the background. I mentioned 1,500 hours last week. There's a tremendous amount of effort that has gone into this, not only from the people in this room, but from people who I'm sure are watching at their desks right now. This is very much a collaborative effort from all of our departments, and I think that this shows in the level of recommendation and forward thinking that you are seeing this year. So thank you. And with that, I'll turn it over.
Thank you. Are there any questions, comments for staff before we move forward?
Thank you. First of all, the city budget unmasked is brilliant. You probably saw me smirking gleefully while you were describing
seen
it. I'm already looking forward to reading the comments under the post, the well-intentioned responses from the city of Albany. It's going to be great. I just want to, are you seeking a recommendation from the Budget Review Committee on the city service fee increase in particular, or not necessarily just?
I think we need to get a level of feedback in regards to the $13, the $14.77, or the essentially comes to $14.82 with that extra nickel that comes in. That has got to be part of the recommendation that we ultimately bring to the council on the 11th. So yes, we do need to get some feedback on that.
Okay, I'll give you mine, if that's okay. So I very much agree that city service fees are basically one of the only remaining revenue options left for cities to generate meaningful revenue outside of a 5-year local operating levy. I know Albany has one of those as well, and likely will only have the one, right? So I think the approach to bring it forward at something like $14.77 or $14.82 is very prudent and well thought out. And so I would support it, and I would urge the council to support it when it gets to that point.
Thank you.
I also wanted to say that the campaign for Unmasked is very brilliant. And I also have some feedback about the city services fee, which I feel the same sentiment that it's needed. I'm wondering if it's ever been floated that maybe some places would, and I'm trying to put this delicately, for those who are living in a very small 1-bedroom apartment, they're sleeping on the couch, their kids are taking the bedroom. And then you've got multi-million-dollar houses and many, many bedrooms. Nobody's even using them. And I know that this is a very broad picture I'm painting, but the impact of the city service fee is going to be very different. And I know that some of those people who are living in the lower income areas would qualify for the water. Would it be more appropriate to float the idea or test the idea of how it could be, I don't want to say sliding scale, because then all of a sudden people are having to put in like, well, this is my income, but maybe based on information that I actually couldn't begin to know where you'd find it, but is there information that would make it easier on lower income households?
Yeah, so, and that kind of drove the conversation that we had with Community Services Consortium and trying to remove barriers in order to make it easier for people to apply and get that assistance from that program. I think when you get into the sliding scale, and this is where a lot of these conversations are much bigger conversations than we can have at the dais right now. Part of the setup around that program was to allow for people to do very easy applications through CSC and have that apply in multiple areas so that they're not having to fill out the same information over and over again, and to be able to have some of those programs mirror. I mean, anything is obviously a conversation, and if the council wants to put time and energy into that, we can always look into it. But that's probably going to be a many, many months conversation that we would have to have, and would be perfect for that strategic plan.
That actually brings me to my next question, because as I understand it, if they're receiving the discount through the city, they're also having a discount on their city services fee.
Correct.
So for them, their city services fee is going to go up. It's going to double almost, and it's going to look exactly like what it was before they got a discount off of it. So
if we go to 1477, so the city services fee portion that's covered by the low income assistance is always 50%. We did look into this to make sure that the resolution was already structured that way. So no matter where the city services fee moves, that assistance portion of it will also move to 50%. So
right. Yeah. I just mean that like it's going to move to what it is now for what people who don't have the city services fee.
It would be $7 and shoot, I'm not going to be able to do this on top of my head. It's about $720. So it wouldn't quite be the $9 that you have right now,
Okay.
but certainly, yes, it would move up some.
Okay. Oh, and I did have another question. This was actually something I wanted to bring up last week, but I couldn't find it. It was in my head. It wasn't in front of me. It's the VOCA, the Victims Advocacy, or Crime Victims. That has a steep reduction in the budget. Is there a reason for that?
So that was the conversation we had around the grant is coming to an end. So usually the way that grant works is you
Okay.
get about a 3-year period, and it's a declining amount that comes in each year. And so that was that creative use of the one-time opioid funding to essentially backfill that. So you're no longer seeing that grant program, but we do have it covered over from the opioid grant revenues and then in the personnel expenditure line.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
When will the city services fee go into effect?
So the recommendation right now pulls that in August. So we would not have enough time to let people know, get it on the bills for July. So we would be looking at August.
Okay, and then my other question is, with the unmask, is that the same thing as sort of this budget brief that you brought up a while back?
Yeah, so sorry, I didn't actually say that. That was in my list of talking points there. But yes, in addition to the budget video, our communications and engagement team is ready to pull together essentially a one-pager budget brief so that we can basically hand that out. We can give it to council members of the budget review committee if you'd like them as well, in order to help explain that budget to people and what it does for them.
And that would appear on the website as well?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
then with the city services fee going up, would we have literature and something like bold on the website,
Yeah.
just letting people know,
Yeah.
really rolling this campaign out?
So yeah, so that's one of the items and it got kind of shoved in at the very end of last week's conversation. So in addition to talking to CSC, we had an extensive conversation with our communications and engagement team about how we can communicate out that city services fee, especially given that we're rolling back that disclaimer piece to make it easier for them to apply. So they already have some mock-ups for being able to pull together some new information on the website. They also identified some areas for posters and handouts, that's what I'm trying to say, specifically targeting some areas where we would typically perhaps see some of those people who may qualify. So one of the areas that we haven't hit in the past that I thought was a very interesting one that they honed in on was kind of getting those out there at our bus stops where we might encounter some of those residents who may qualify. So in addition to that, getting it out through the utility bills. Typically the utility bills, those get read by our more elderly population, which is another one that's on a fixed income. So really trying to hit it from all sides. And then CSC as well has volunteered to provide additional information. They do elderly and, senior and disability fairs that they get out for. And so they have offered to target information at those as well, because oftentimes those groups are also lower income.
Does anyone online have any questions or comments?
Yeah, I actually have my hand raised. I believe Councilor McLeod does as well. Sorry, this is Councilor Steph Newton Azor. Wanted to quickly ask a question of to Kayla about the revisions to the low income program and how it relates to the city services fee. I'm just trying to think like scenarios, like when someone's utility bill isn't in their name, like what if they are renting and the utility bill is in their landlord's name?
Yeah, so
How would
that's
that also impact them?
Yeah, so that's always a challenge because the way that low-income assistance programs work, and it's not just here, it's nationwide. Typically, there has to be a matching name that is on that bill. So when it comes to if you have a landlord who is, say, paying for the entire unit and then billing that back out through the rent, that is not one that we have an option to address. That being said, that's a really great educational piece because I think oftentimes landlords don't understand that aspect of it. So being able to help them understand where some of that opportunity is, maybe if you're not including that in your rent, here's an option. But yeah, those are bigger conversations that I think as we look towards long-term and having some additional capacity and staffing, could begin to address and look at a broader program. And in fact, Chris Bailey, our Director of Public Works, has talked about if they can get capacity in that group, wanting to relook and revisit what that program looks like long-term, so that we can increase the level of assistance and the opportunities for assistance.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I also had a comment.
Yeah.
Very good.
I agree that I love the city budget unmasked campaign. I think it's brilliant and is a wonderful tool to be able to engage with our residents and really get their attention to be able to understand more of what is involved with our budget. And so I just wanted to say kudos to whoever came up with that. I think it's brilliant. Also, as far as the water bill with the Community Services Consortium, with the name, I wanted to echo Councilor Newton Azor on what she said with the with having the bill in a different name. Recently, I encountered a resident who came to me with a similar situation, not unlike my own, where her name had recently changed. My name also changed a couple years ago. Who had the bill in her old name and did not completely understand the process of getting it changed into her current name. And when she went to apply for that assistance, that part of her assistance was denied because it was in a different name. And so any way that we can try to make things easier for these people in need of this assistance is going to be something that we'll need to be able to do. Do you have any further comments on that, Kayla, with the name?
Well, like I said, the larger picture of the names, because there's many different reasons why someone's bill might not be in their name. So that's going to be a bigger conversation. What I will say to instances like that where someone's name is not, matching the bill because of a change in last name or something like that, that is a good conversation to have with our utility billing folks. What I will say is that is a wonderful group. So I've had the opportunity to sit down and shadow that group. One of the first things I did when I came in was actually shadow a lot of our frontline employees. So I spent a good amount of time with that group, and that is a very kind and helpful customer service oriented group. So a lot of what you don't ever see get to the table or even get to the city services fee discussion and the assistance discussion is they do a lot in the background to sort of help people come up with payment plans, work through, so that we are making sure that we're not, we're trying our best to avoid doing things like shutoffs. And it's really wonderful if you get to sit down with them and experience that and see the level of service and assistance. They bend over backwards trying to find those opportunities. I can't speak specifically to the process that your constituent went through. Certainly if they have documentation, I'm sure that there's something that we can do to get them updated for the name on their bill. But yeah, there's a larger piece there. A lot of times where names are not matching on the bill is going to be things like landlords who are putting it in their name already.
Thank you, Kayla.
Sorry, it's hard to know if you're done or not over the virtual.
Mm-hmm. Any other comments, questions?
Oh, it was on the whole time. I have a comment, mostly as just wanting to provide some experience from the other side. I used to work at CSC in eligibility. I've worked at the Lebanon office, the Albany office, and the Corvallis office, and the Albany office is the most busy and the most stretched. So when somebody makes an appointment, they're informed of everything they need to have in front of them, and they get their appointment, and that you get your appointment because you're about to have your utilities shut off. And if you get there and there is one little thing that doesn't quite make sense, your appointment is canceled. And a lot of people end up losing, like they have to leave because they're really upset. They lose their energy or their water or whatever utility that they're there for assistance for. And they have to make another appointment. And it's usually weeks, if not months away.
Yeah, so great sentiment there, because that's actually a question that I asked about as well when I met with the representative from CSC. And so that was something that they acknowledged had been a problem in the past. So they've actually, in order to be able to address that high volume that comes out of the Albany office, they've essentially over the last several years added, basically brought themselves up to 4.1 FTEs to be able to address that. They have moved to creating, the reason that you see kind of a 1 week opening for submitting applications is so that they can get those applications in, look at them, see if there's pieces that are missing, make those phone calls, make those contacts with people prior to them coming in order to avoid exactly what you're talking about. Now, is it 100%? Certainly not, but they had already recognized and made some concerted efforts to try to address exactly what you're talking about there.
Another piece that I just wanted to share as far as my experience is oftentimes the bill is in the person's name who is at work all day, every day, and the other person who has the flexible schedule, the bill is not in their name. Is there a way that they're working around that so that the person whose name is on the bill is able to send in their information, call, verify who they are?
So they are actually doing applications now over the phone in order to allow for people who can't come in to be able to move through that application process. And then
Super.
Yeah.
Nice.
A lot of questions that I asked too. I had a very lengthy, almost 2-hour meeting with them about it.
Counselor Thompson had something. Counselor, Commissioner Cisneros.
Yes. Go ahead.
I also have a
please.
question.
Great, thank you. I have a comment. Throughout this year, hearing all of these conversations and reading all the documents, I've heard the challenges that you're having with staffing that's coming, revenue, costs, and the shifting at the federal level. I just want to commend all of you for leadership and city staff. You have collaborated, you have worked hard to find solutions in addition to, while maintaining city services. I've heard about the restructuring, process improvement, cross-training and succession planning, technological advances. And to me, hearing about the burnout and losing tenured employees is disheartening especially for all of you. And our fire hearing, with the overtime, these individuals, we want them rested, right? Well rested, because they see the hard parts of humanity. And so what I've seen through all of this is dedication, hard work and thoughtfulness, especially through this budget, and resiliency. So I just want to say that your work is valued and appreciated. And to council, I also want to speak out in support of increasing the city services fee, option 1 or 2. Thank you.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
to take a kind of a different tact. The more things change, the more they stay the same. I was on the budget committee for 10 years, and this is a completely different format, and you've done great work, thorough work. However, part of this, I have found in the past, part of this process is a chance for us, especially the elected officials, to have some time in detail with the folks back there. And to hear you, not tonight, but earlier, the first go around, you did great work talking in detail about different departments, but I was a little not understanding why the person who's highly paid back there isn't sitting right there. And that gets into decisions over this organization's workload, which seems to be, like, going back to the very beginning of this budget, it has a personnel where decisions were made, full-time equivalent decisions. And to just kind of put a big picture on it, those decisions were, over the years, there have been less, not so much in police and fire, those to some degree in fire, but less frontline people in parks and libraries. And there's been recently an increase in folks who work at City Hall, City Manager's Office, Finance, HR, et cetera. And you explained it. You gave an answer, not you and the city manager. You gave an answer. And I heard that answer, and to some degree, I accept it to some degree. However, I don't think the market, or being competitive in the employment market, is in the strategic plan. I think what is in the strategic plan is things like parks, like we're losing summer sounds, we're losing the paddle boats, which I know is ticky-tacky on my part, but it's real. Library. You know, you're a city councilor, what do I want? I want the library open on Sundays. And it seems we're getting farther away from that. We're getting farther away from that at a time when this council, well before I got on here, well before even the class of 2022 got on here, began a process, I believe, of aggressively promoting and searching for growth. Growth for the sake of growth. And if the growth is causing our staff to be overloaded, I mean, we need to think about where we're at. And does growth for the sake of growth have some end where we have a better budget at some point? Because you go back through past budgets, the concept of more costs, less revenue is throughout them, year after year after year. That is not new, no matter how you format it. That is not new. And so I just, once again, it's something I've done ever since I got on this council. I got to question our just aggressiveness for growth and what that means to the current residents, what it means to my neighbors in the city. So I'm trying to keep this high level, not get into the detail.
So I'm going to challenge you a little bit on that. So from doing budget for years and years and years and coming into this organization and seeing how the budget discussions have rolled out, what those conversations have looked like in the past, I would actually say that we are closer than you have ever been in being able to have those conversations about the library being open more often, having greater investments in parks. Because up until this budget, as we talked about earlier, the pieces that really ultimately made it to the city manager's discussion and ultimately into the recommendation to be discussed with this group or with the council as a whole, very much were already greatly diminished, right? You weren't hearing about what were those unfunded needs or how do we get there to start moving that needle forward. And that was a fundamental shift that happened this year, is we need to understand what are those unfunded operating costs so that we can look for areas to scale them, and also so we can look at areas where addressing targeted capacity allows us to have those long-term conversations around expenditures and revenues. We've, since 2021, not had a significant conversation around that revenue side of it, and we've not had a significant conversation about how do we restructure the organization to make it more sustainable long-term. A lot of the focus here in this budget recommendation was on making investments that count. So talking to some of the personnel changes that have happened over the last couple of months, when we get into the reorgs that happened in the city manager's office, we ultimately reorged out an FTE to provide back to the organization in order to provide some additional support. We ended up pulling in a risk manager position, which was already budgeted in HR because they were having such large capacity issues that they could not move that position forward. So we're essentially operating that position as essentially a catalyst position, getting it set up, getting it working, and then that will ultimately move back out of the city manager's office in the future. That's the intent with with that position. The reason that we did that is because we can look at the growth in our claims over time. And so we can see that the city is pushing out more and more funding to pay for claims that really, if we had a concerted effort in risk management and training, we could actually dial that down. I hate paying out funding or paying out taxpayer dollars to pay for claims, because to me, the taxpayers are not getting value out of that. That drives me crazy from a budget standpoint. So if I can start to move that down, I'm going to do so. The reorganizations that happened in the finance department, we actually utilized a position that had never been filled in order to reorg to get that budget manager position. And the reason for that is because we saw there had been a compression piece that had happened several years ago, and I apologize, I can't remember the exact year, where we essentially compressed down what were typically sort of higher level positions into frontline positions, really trying to make sure we could at least get the boots on the ground. The problem with that was we no longer had the people who were able to do the strategy piece of it. And so what you ultimately started to see was this slip back in process, and I love you guys in finance here, but you start to see these slip back in processes because you're just operating in crisis mode. And that means you can't move forward, you can't clean those up, you can't make them more efficient, which means every single individual transaction becomes more and more expensive because we're not able to do things like automate them. I am very, very conscious about how do we start to move that inflection point down, because if you don't have those strategic conversations, if you're not making those investments, it ultimately costs you more long term. And so for me, anytime that I'm coming at a budget, I'm going to look at what are the investments that we can make today and what is going to be the return on that investment. We actually had, I didn't really get to talk about it last week, but we actually built this year for the staff back there a return on investment calculator because that was something that they had not had previously. So essentially allowing them to plug in some of the different options that they were looking at, what it would do, and basically work through with them a reasonable expectation on the payback period, on different investments, what implications that would have. So that's some of what you got to see. We talked very briefly about it with the Monday.com and that payback period. It also comes up in the agenda management system. So we were able to start to say, okay, let's put some data to it. Let's see how much we move that number down. This also gets into that conversation about where does the city, if we don't make these investments, where does that city services fee end up going long term? And we're looking at that, ultimately getting to that $30 a month if we can't start to make some of these investments. So being able to have that capacity and that strategic knowledge and level of expertise to talk about things like the community development fees, to talk about the 501c3, civic 501c3, to be able to talk about things. I didn't get to bring this up last week because we were tight for time, but one of the areas that's sort of been in set it and forget it because there's not been capacity to be able to go through it or at the level to go through it is our intergovernmental agreements. In starting to look through those, coming into the organization from the outside, I could see as I'm going through those, I can start to see areas where, we should probably be recouping that from some of these groups that we're doing services for. We should be recouping some of that administration, but we're not because the capacity has only allowed us to essentially renew, rather than making those investments in the organization to long-term support that sustainability and support keeping those prices down.
Thank you. Well, I want to say I wanted to point out to get into the weeds, where you created a parks building you did create a manager and a parks building 1 position. I want to commend that. I think that's the kind of taking a position and creating some frontline people. I didn't want to miss that point.
No worries. You should. It's great for you to challenge it. And at the end of the day, you have to be able to take this budget and explain it to your constituents. Yeah. And we were very cognizant of that as we were going through. Is we were thinking all the way through. How do we move the needle? How do we keep things down? We didn't settle for just jumping to like an $18 city services fee like some of our neighbors did. We did that due diligence to say, okay, how much can we pull out before we ever get to that conversation? So.
Marilyn?
Thank you. What I heard on Thursday and what I've heard tonight is proof, I think, to anybody who's listening that Albany has grown up. I've said this before. We're not a small town any longer. We are a big city. And this in-depth examination of everything outside of crisis mode to get us to smooth things out and change is something that big cities have to do. It will be better when people aren't in a panic and when people can stay here longer because they're not burned out. Councilor Thompson mentioned the parade of department heads who used to come before the Budget Committee and explain their operations and their needs and wants. And for the last 7 years, it has not been that way because the emphasis has been on convincing, starting with staff and then with the council and the Budget Committee, that this is one organization. We are one team. Everybody's paychecks say City of Albany, and it's one pool of money that has to be shared. And as the department heads have changed over time, they get it, and they operate like a team. I appreciate that. It's so much more efficient, and it's better better public service to present a team front. One other comment about, I guess I don't understand and I don't see a move of aggressive growth and growth for the sake of growth. Growth happens because people want to live here. People want to work here. People want to build homes for those people who want to be here. That's growth. And it's not something the city has done. It's something that has happened because of the way, possibly the way that we run the city. I don't understand that. There's a blank in my understanding of how things work.
But then I suggest maybe we don't have an economic development team, because that's what they're here for, is to aggressively pursue growth. You know, this council, like I said, prior to 2022, there's a series of annexations. That's about growth. The East Albany plan, the series of, I know that they were state directed, but this series recently of regulatory reform, that's all encouraging growth aggressively. That's what I meant.
And I just want to be just a little bit clear on that. So economic developments, their purview is not to go out and aggressively pursue growth. Really what their job is to do is to help us, because we know growth is coming, we know investment is going to come, is to help us target industries that are going to make the most sense for our community in terms of raising that quality of life for the people who live here in Albany, as well as balancing that property tax discussion, because ultimately, if you don't have a city that is growing, the expenses to the individual resident go up. So I have had in my career the fortune or misfortune of working for a city that was in a population decline and was also a property tax-based city. And what happens when you get into a situation like that is that inflation is still happening. The cost of every service is still going up, but the number of people that you get to spread that cost of service across goes down. And so you end up seeing what become very, very large fees to individual units or individual families, to the point that it actually starts to then further fuel people being forced out. Unfortunately, I worked outside of the Detroit area where that is a very significant problem. So
Please, that's I'm not going to. We can talk about this another time. That's kind of insulting to me. I understand that. I'm not talking. We're getting into detailed decisions, and I'll yield my time to somebody else.
Commissioner Losey?
Yes. Yeah, I have a couple things. So I do have a question regarding the change to the chart of accounts, which I fully appreciate, and I think that makes so much sense for compliance, especially somebody that does their own budgets and has to, do all that wonderful filing with the state. If somebody ends up with a question, because there's a lot of condensing there that's happening, and a lot of these funds, transient lodging tax has very specific revenue expenditures. Is there a process to get more detailed information that'll be available on that updated website? Like if they want to know what the contractual services are, like a request form or something like that, just out of curiosity on that one.
Yeah, so I mean, at any point, I wouldn't, at any point, if somebody wants to know more detail, they can always reach out to us. So within the financial system, we can see a lot more detail than what those object codes are. So we can actually see detail for every transaction that's done. We also set up a number of project codes to allow us for some easier reporting in terms of major programs or events while still parsing things into the proper expenditure categories for our reporting purposes. So there's a lot of different options. It really depends on what someone is asking for. But I am not concerned with not being able to pull detail for people.
Okay. And then I did also have a question. So looking at the line items, and I was trying not to get too much detail. The Albany Transit System wages and salaries was one of the only kind of wage salary sections that we saw a decrease. Is that due to some of the reclassification?
That is actually due to some of the turnover in that. So we actually had a great conversation with their business manager on that because we both went, wow, why did that drop? And so there's a couple things. It is some of the turnover that's happened, so less expensive employees coming in. What has also happened is there's a spread. So those personnel are actually spread between 3 different programs, between the paratransit, the transit, and the Lynn Benton loop. And so what we did this year, which I think was really a great approach, is we essentially took personnel down to nothing and then built up what's called the personnel pool from scratch. So in prior years, that kind of got added onto and adjusted. We did it all the way from scratch. What that allowed us to do is essentially we ended up auditing positions through doing that, which was an unintended thing, but ended up happening. But it also allowed us to look in and see, oh, okay, changes that we thought had been made in payroll systems at various points to reallocate someone to a different spot. We were able to identify some of those that had not been done, get those corrected. But ultimately, it's a combination of all of those things for that grouping. But yeah, that's one we actually flagged as well.
Yeah, it's a good surprise, right, to see a decrease sometimes. Okay, and then the last thing, I'll share a little love for economic development. Historically, this town was founded as a timber town, and you would notice that that's not an industry, having worked at the museum for years. But looking forward ahead and bringing in economic development, they brought in the specialty metals industry and things like that. So it's always good to have that department here helping with being prepared for those sorts of situations.
I have a couple questions, if now's a good time. Kayla, I'm sorry. Kayla, going back to what
Let
you
us
were
know who's
saying-
talking.
I'm sorry, this is Counselor McLeod.
Okay.
Kayla, going back to the what you were saying with the Community Services Consortium, taking applications over the phone. Can you tell me when that started and when what the requirements are for taking applications over the phone? Because specifically the constituent I spoke with was a new applicant and was not able to apply over the phone, had to be in person this year. So I'm curious as to when that started, because that's kind of inconsistent with what I had been hearing within the community. That's just my first question.
Yeah, and I would have to tell you, I would have to get back to you on that. I didn't specifically ask the question of when that changeover started, but I can certainly make note of it and reach back out.
That would be great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Also, I just wanted to thank the budget staff for putting this together. I appreciate all the effort that went into it, especially the one-on-one meetings that we had together to go over explanations and concerns that we had. Thank you for implementing the header footer suggestions that I had. That was really helpful in reading through the budget. That change has made the full document a little easier to read. I'm still a little disappointed in the way that it was presented because it's neither in the old format nor in the new format, which at times can make it nearly impossible to understand. Looking at each line item with what looked like kind of blanks for the current biennium, but not for the previous ones, it's difficult to know if this item was an item that was removed or not being funded or has now been collapsed into something else. And conversely, with also with items that show blank for the previous biennium but not for the current one, it's difficult to decipher if this is a newly funded item or if it now contains previously itemized lines. And having to question nearly every line item this way and receive notes from staff regarding nearly each one of these is completely impractical and devoid of transparency. So at times it was really frustrating to try to understand because it was neither the old format nor the new format. And it kind of really left a lot of questions at times.
Yeah, and I hear your frustration. We have just as much frustration on our end that we can't live in both systems. What I will say is I'm very excited about once we make that transition over on July 1 and are able to build out our digital budget book. That is going to give a lot more ability to see those details and see those narratives for everything. And then also moving forward gives us the ability at that point to turn on the historical tie-throughs, so you don't end up with this document with blanks in prior years or blanks in the current years. Is where they're showing. So yeah, it's a frustration. It's a limitation of our system. Unfortunately, we are, that's what we're stuck with. But I think it's going to pay dividends from the reporting standpoint long term for you. And yeah, you got to see it in particular because you did come in and take advantage of those one-on-ones to be able to see. So you got to peek behind the curtain on how complex our system is sometimes.
I really found it difficult though, because we just couldn't tell what was what. And when you're looking at a budget and you're trying to decide, is this good for the city? And you just can't tell by the way that it's formatted. It makes it extremely frustrating to be able to make that decision about whether this is good for the city or not good for the city when you have over 100 pages of lines where you don't know if this is new or not new, or if this is a coding issue or not a coding issue, or if it's part of something that was or part of something that will be. It's all very difficult to be able to make a sound decision with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm making notes on that. Like I said, this is the one transitionary document that has to happen with the system. So we should be able to go back to, we should be able to look at more robust reporting options moving forward. So definitely something that we want to address as well, because for every frustration you have in looking at it, we have the same frustration in being able to go through. So no, totally valid.
Any other comments, questions online?
Do you have anything? I can go now.
It looks like Commissioner Samuels has her
she had?
hand raised, and I'm not
We didn't know
sure
she was online.
she knows that doesn't show on your end.
We didn't know she was here. That's fantastic.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
She arrived like 2 minutes after roll call.
Apologies, I couldn't get my name put on there right away. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I had one question. I was curious when it comes to growth and looking at growth and moving forward as a city that is growing, how come there's no talk about education and how that affects the class sizes and school system? Like I haven't heard any talk about that, but that's such a big part of the community. I just didn't know where that conversation takes place.
Yeah, so I mean, some of that conversation, that's part of that is going to be outside of the city. That's going to be dealing with the school district. But what I can say is anytime we go through a comprehensive planning process, so that's when we're really looking at what our long-term growth looks like in the community, where we expect that to be, what we expect it to look like. Part of that conversation is then pre-planning spaces for where schools are going to have to come in, hospitals, other amenities. It also is a portion of our development review process. So when we get new land use applications, they're having a conversation about whether that is triggering some of those thresholds and what that looks like with the school board. That is not a decision entirely within the city. But yeah, it's largely happening in those development review, comprehensive planning pieces. So yeah, it does happen, just not in this forum.
Oh, okay. And then I was also wondering, when builders come in and build a bunch of houses and apartments, is there ever any push for them to set aside money? Like, if you're targeting this market, we're gonna have this many families, like, increase to, like, set aside money, like, for education? Does that make sense?
Chair Summers.
Yes,
There is a school district excise tax, which is kind of comparable to our systems development charges, which is meant to address the growth of schools. And I will just add to what Kayla had provided you that GAPS staff, planning staff, are in frequent contact and liaison with our own community development staff. So they do look to the future in terms of growth. And you know, it's Portland State University issues these growth projections every year. And staff don't push those or try to make us grow faster. We respond to those projections for growth. And I have to assume that the school district does the same thing.
Okay, thank you.
So I only have a couple things. Thank you, Chair. First, I want to thank you for the work that you've done and the staff as well. I've been here since almost 7 years now, and I'm really glad we switched to this model than the previous one, because it felt like we were negotiating with that person while they're sitting at the table instead of the whole organization coming at once as a concerted effort. So I appreciate that. And I really like the fact that we're aligning the strategic budget to the strategic plan. I think that's going to bear great fruit for us going forward. And I think it's something that we didn't consider early on when we did the strategic plan. So thank you. I love the study on masks. I got some funny messages from people today. So I thought that was really fantastic. And people do text me with their thoughts on certain things that we do on a regular basis. And that was one that was very positive. So I appreciate that. Growth. One of the things that we did early on when I became mayor was the Housing Affordability Task Force. And the Housing Affordability Task Force fed into, stop me if I'm incorrect, our HIP Housing Implementation Plan. And we're working to that model based on data we receive from Portland State University. And it's a well-done document, and it's extremely well done. I'm really proud that this city has one, because other cities use it as an example of what they should be doing or could be doing. So I thank you for that. And the last thing is the digital budget. I'm so excited to see what that looks like. Will the council and the lay persons on the committee have a chance to play with that or look at that or use that as a tool?
Oh, the whole public will.
Oh.
So by going to a digital budget book, it essentially takes our entire budget book into they have the option of primarily a web format, but it can also be exported into a PDF format for anyone who does need a printed version of it. But it essentially turns our budget book into a full website that can tell stories about how things are, how programs are being funded. It gives people the ability to change the way that information shows, whether they're a bar graph type of person, more of a line graph type of person, whether they'd like to see it in tables. It really gives a lot of options. It also allows them to sort the information in different ways. So one of the challenges we had in putting together the presentation is, as much as we love our public works team, they also live across multiple funds. So as you're trying to show that information in a PowerPoint, which runs strictly in a sort of timeline sort of fashion, it becomes difficult. But with a digital budget book, not only you, but the public will be able to sort and drill into that information in a different way, in a much more inclusive way.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Thank you. I have a couple more things. Councilor Newton-Azar brought up something that was really interesting to me about the landlords on one bill. I think that we should do some community meetings with landlords to educate them on the city services fee. I think when she said that, I was like, oh, maybe we should get together with the landlords and maybe the RCC or one of the places in town and have them come talk to us about the billing. And the last thing is that I like the idea of adding 5 cents to the $14.77 for the library. It puts a softer landing for them. And I think the staff would appreciate that. And I know a lot of the community would as well.
And I will say, I'm hearing a lot in terms of wanting to have conversations around that assistance and that low-income assistance and what that looks like. So I think it would be I think it would be a good conversation, particularly when we bring back the budget recommendation to the council for final approval, that city services fee conversation. I think it would be a really good option at that time for the council to perhaps give some cohesive direction to staff for us to take some of that additional time and capacity and direct it towards looking at that programming, over the next several months.
Well, the low-income assistance program is really big. I think it's important. And I know in my office, I have those CSC forums for my clients that are financially challenged. And also with the fire med, I actually bring it to the fire department, get a chance to talk to them about it as well. So getting that form in front of us also helps. I know I see probably between 1,600 and 3,000 people every annual election period. So I'll have them send me a link to that and I'll download it myself.
That it? I do want to say that, Peter, since you came on board with your leadership skills, you've turned your department heads into a well-functioning team instead of different fiefdoms. And it's made this process clearer and made it so we're not having to hear line item by line item from these different people. And we spent 4 or 5 meetings, line item by line item. So I appreciate the leadership you've shown with this. So thank you very much. Now, if there are no more questions, no more comments online or here at the dais, I would entertain a motion.
I'd move that we recommend that we, I'd move that we move that we approve the budget as presented with the 1482 service fee.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to accept the budget with the 1482 service fee. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign.
No.
Thank you.
I say no.
Understood. Okay, let's do it by roll call, please.
Smith,
Yes.
Larson,
Yes.
McGee. Losi,
Yes.
Newton Azor,
Yeah.
Summers,
Yes.
Thompson,
No.
Rollins,
Yes.
Cisneros,
Yes.
Bach,
Yes.
McLeod,
Aye.
Samuels,
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. With that, we are going to close out the budget meeting, but we have another one just to start up. So we're going to have a 5 to 10 minute bio break so that people can take care of things. The budget meeting, city budget meeting is now closed. So And now to correct a procedural error, I have to reopen the Budget Committee meeting. Budget Committee meeting is reopened. I did not ask for comment from the public. My bad. So, Eric, do we have any people who want to speak before us and give us comment?
We do not, Chair. We do have an item that was submitted in writing. It was presented at the May 22nd, 2025 meeting. It is from Monica Stevenson. I did want to mention it today.
Okay, thank you. I believe we addressed that at the 22nd, the meeting on the 22nd is, okay. So, with no public wanting to speak here, no one wanting to speak, and nothing online, I'm going to close the budget hearing. The vote stands. Okay, we're going to move into our the ARA budget section of this. I will now open the ARA budget meeting. So, let me ask a procedural question, Eric. Do we need to do the flag salute again?
That's your prerogative, Chair.
I think we've done one for this evening. I don't believe we need to do another unless someone else would like to do the flag salute again. Don't see anybody jumping up, so how about folks online? Crickets, okay. We will just move on. Could we please have a roll call?
Smith?
Here.
Larson?
Here.
McGee? Losi?
Here.
Newton Azor?
Present, virtually.
Summers?
Here.
Thompson?
Here.
Rollins?
Here.
Cisneros?
Here.
Bach?
Here.
McLeod?
Still present online.
Samuels?
Present online.
Johnson?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. And now, for this section, we have to elect officers again. So, the floor is open to nominations.
I make a motion that Will Summers continue as the ARA chair.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that, moved and seconded that Will Summers continue on as chair. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Okay. And it says we need to elect a vice chair. Okay, so here.
I make a motion to nominate vice chair Councilor Michael Thompson.
Any
Second.
other? Second there. Any others? All right. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed, same sign. Thank you. Michael, you are vice chair.
Thank you.
There were minutes for the meeting. ARA, I would entertain a motion to either accept or provide corrections.
Move to adopt the minutes as presented.
Second.
Moved and seconded to adopt the minutes as presented. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same
Aye.
sign. Pardon me. Opposed, same sign. Thank you. They are approved. Now we're going to move into public hearing portion of this. Eric, do we have anybody in the public who wants to talk about the ARA budget?
Chair, we may want to open the public hearing first.
Oh, I didn't. We're opening the public hearing.
We do not have anyone registered to speak.
And we've had no online comments.
That is correct. We can just leave this open, though, in the event anyone shows up at the meeting, and we can ask if anyone in the room wishes to speak on the budget.
Fine, we'll do it that way. Okay, so moving right along. Tonight's agenda is a public hearing for the recommendations of the 25-27 biennium Albany revitalization budget. Directions for how to testify and submit written materials were published in the meeting agenda. I declare the public, already open. I'm a little slow. Okay. Does the staff have a report?
Thank you, Chair Summers. This will be a fairly quick report. When the Central Albany Revitalization District was established, it was 2001. The goal was to catalyze and incentivize revitalization in Central Albany through targeted public investment and partnerships with the private sector. And over the years, despite economic setbacks, such as the Great Recession and periods of inflation, the ARA board and staff remained focused on completing 52 community-identified projects and strategically realigned spending to match evolving timelines and priorities. As a result, CARA has supported infrastructure upgrades, reduced vacancy rates, increased housing density, and attracted significant private investment, outcomes that will continue to benefit the community well beyond the life of the district. It's been a success. The 2025 to 27 biennium marks a major milestone. The Water Avenue project is nearing completion. The project reflects years of planning, design, and community engagement, and it's a capstone achievement for CARA and transforms the waterfront. Its completion will serve as a catalyst for continued private redevelopment in the district. As the district approaches its sunset, the ARA board will be asked to provide direction on remaining resources and to consider final investment opportunities in the fall of this year. Now let me turn it over to Kayla for her report.
And I promise you, if this one takes 3 hours to present, it is on you, not me. I only have 3 slides. Just to bring us up to speed on the ARA, again, not knowing how much experience each of you have, the ARA is a legally separate entity from the city. Through a weird quirk here in Oregon law, we were able to have the same board members as a council. On other states I've worked for, you have to have a separate board. So it becomes very interesting. You have to take one cap off and put the next cap on when you're talking about these funds. Essentially, council serves as the board. The Budget Review Committee for the city also serves as the Budget Review Committee for the ARA. But ultimately, they are separate entities with separate legal obligations and separate funds. We cannot commingle those funds. But the city does help administer that programming because we do have the expertise on staff to be able to execute those programs. Looking at the ARA budget, this was ultimately expected to be a sunset budget. So we went through a very similar process that you saw over on the city budget side, really working through those conversations about what were the outstanding obligations as this ARA reached its end of life. That being said, just shortly before the initial draft budgets went out about 3 weeks ago, we did hear from our consultants, Tiberius Solutions, who helps us monitor and look at the maximum indebtedness for the ARA, that there would perhaps be some additional funding available in the ARA. It was mentioned in the budget message that the projections and performance of the ARA are doing better than expected, and that there is the potential for $3.1 million in additional revenues. That being said, that forced us to do a pretty quick entry of that into the reserve portion of the budget here. So that is reflected. We actually did it the Friday before those packets went out to all of you. And because of that, staff did not feel comfortable making a recommendation on the use of that funding at this time. We simply would not have been able to do the due diligence, have that conversation with the ARA board, and allow for meaningful reflection and direction from that board. So as such, we put it in a placeholder in that reserve line. And then the expectation is we're working with Tiberius Solutions to make sure we finalize those numbers. We're going to review it with our finance team and ultimately bring this back for allocation in a fall session for the ARA. That way you guys can have a clear picture of the amount of money that is sitting there, what the allowable uses are, and be able to make a strategic decision on how you want to allocate those funds. So like I said, very, very brief budget here. Ultimately, everything in here outside of that reserve is tied to debt payments or final payments on Water Avenue. That is essentially what this program is doing. Yeah, go for it.
If you take more funds, the more funds approach, would this extend the life of the ARA?
No, we would still be looking if we're coming back to the ARA board with the additional funding, we would be looking for opportunities for them to utilize that funding if they choose to utilize that funding within the time frame set for the ARA. When you establish an urban renewal district like this, they have particular dates that they're going to sunset anyway.
Right.
So we would still have to live within that.
Okay, thank you.
I have my hand raised if there's a possibility for me to give comment.
Well, I was just about to start asking for those, so please make your comment.
Absolutely. This is Councilor Newton Azor. Okay, so I have one comment, one question.
Yeah.
One is, I feel like it is, we want to get this sunset date. We want to be have the best use of time. And I know I've had one of our county commissioners reach out to me and ask about, hey, when is CARA wrapping up? Because they want to, pencil that into their budget whenever the TIF program's over, right? And I think that meeting in the fall is much too late. I'd like to get going on this. And I think it'd be great for us to have a board planning session sooner than the fall. Ideally, by the end of June would be great. That's just my feedback. And then number two, I feel like the ARA board has been very clear in wanting to reopen and support other businesses in downtown Albany. So I don't see why that wouldn't be a direction that we would go. So
yeah, so I just want to talk very quickly to why the fall date. That is purely a function of when all of the information can be available. So a couple things that are outstanding. Tiberius Solutions wants to go through and dial in those numbers, make sure we have a full understanding of what that amount looks like. We also need to do due diligence from our side, and some of that due diligence is a little bit stuck waiting on the completion of 2023 and 2024 financials. So once we complete those, we can get in there, make sure all of the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed, and that there is in fact 3.1 million there available. Because what we would hate to do is have the ARA allocate out 3.1 million, and then it comes back and it's only like 2.9 or 2.8. So that's what the holdup is on that. We are looking at as soon as we possibly can get that across the finish line for you.
Michael.
Yeah, just following on those comments, once again, everything old is new again. I can't recall how many times, and I asked a few times, but other people asked throughout the history of the ARA budget, we would ask Seth Sherry, how much funds are there? How much funds are there? And I will acknowledge that I do not know the accounting of this kind of a program. It's way over my head, I get that. But once again, I would just, to follow on those comments, urge us to work as quickly as possible to come to that final conclusion and wrap up CARA in a way that is respectful of how this money was created, and that was part of the CARA program. And we've talked a lot about ending CARA with the waterfront, and now I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised that it ends up being part of some funds left over, because we asked over and over again, how much funds you got? So here we are. So I just, as quick as humanly possible, my vote, my suggestion is to wrap this up.
Other comments? Other comments?
So I have just one thing. There was work that was cut short on the waterfront. If we're gonna allocate these funds, in my estimation, it's the best use, because we told our community 20 years ago, 21 years ago, 4 years ago, that the waterfront was the last project. And I think that's the best use of those funds, and that's my personal feelings on the matter.
The $3.1 million that you're talking about, that is property assessments that came in at higher rates than expected.
So it's maximum indebtedness, so it's money that we could potentially collect. It hasn't been collected yet. That would be part of the conversation, and this is why it becomes more complicated, and we want to be able to bring in Tiberius Solutions to talk with the ARA board on the intricacies of this. There's options from allocating that funding to not even collecting that funding. So there's a whole range of options that the ARA board would need to consider for that. And that's why it's a more complicated conversation that we don't want to sort of shoehorn into this meeting. So, yeah.
Does this budget reflect the additional $3.1 million?
It is sitting in the reserves. That transfers contingencies other line that you see down there at the bottom, it is included in there along with all of the reserves for the debt payments.
All right, thank you very much. Comments online? Comments at the dais? Glasses on to read the rest of my
So
script.
that brings us to then the action recommended. So we just need to get approval to move forward this budget for ARA approval at the June 11th meeting.
So I will entertain a motion.
I move to approve this budget, ARA budget, as presented.
Second.
Chair, we need public comment as well, if we could get to
yep.
there before we vote on this.
Very good, sir. Thank you very much for reminding me. We are still open with the public comment. Is there any anybody out there that wants to say something about the ARA budget?
We have nobody signed up to speak.
Can you give Maria a mic?
Do you want to come up to the mic?
ARA, I just want to make sure that the 3 million is not actual monies that are in the reserve, because they have not yet completed the financials from 22-23. Are those connected?
So, no. So they are not, so what they are projected revenues. So when we're building out a budget, we're going to take the existing actuals that we've incurred as well as projected revenues over that time and essentially allocate them out in a plan. So in this case, that 3.1 million is projected revenues that we allocated into that reserve line, awaiting that conversation. So hasn't been collected yet, but is separate from that. They're tied together because we need to check numbers, but ultimately that 3.1 million is money that hasn't been collected yet. It's the other side of it that is waiting on the 23-24, which is like making sure that all of our I's are dotted and T's are crossed on all of the bills that we would owe out. So
Okay, so are they now wanting the city to give them more money?
Who's they? Sorry.
As in ARA?
No.
Okay.
So the ARA, it's a urban renewal district overlay that basically, it's a tax increment financing district. So it's an overlay where they are collecting additional property tax in order to reinvest that in that area for redevelopment of, in this case, it's the downtown area. So they are collecting revenue independently. The city just happens to staff and provide that financial servicing for them as well as administration for them so that they don't have to spend that money on hiring their own teams for that.
Chair Summers, this is for public comment on the budget, and I might suggest that Maria come and talk to staff with any of her questions.
Okay,
And,
thank you.
and this staff has been very, very good at being able to give you the time you need to get your answers and so that you understand it. So If you got more questions, I recommend you call these ladies up here. Or you can call Peter. Okay. Is there any further public comment? I will now close the public comment period. Now we'll take a vote because there's a motion on the table in a second. All in favor of accepting the CARA budget as presented, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. It passes unanimously. And with that, I will end this meeting and we'll all be able to go home.